Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Honor to the Sublime One, the Worthy One, the fully enlightened one. Welcome. Um, Ursula, I think I remember you. I'm not sure. You're not brand new to my stuff, are you? No, I didn't think so. But Noobles or Nubbles, I don't think I've met you before. No. Okay. Well, if when there's people that have never been at any of my little events here at the Buddha Center. Are you? Well, you have Buddha Center Sangha, so I'm assuming you're not new to the Buddha Center. Have you, or are you? Oh, okay. Do you have our website that has the schedule of events and like the different monastics and teachers who do different things? Okay, good. So I'll give an introduction. My name is Jayantha, which is my Pali name. I'm formally known here as Farox. I've been on staff at the Buddha Center for just about 2 years. Um, I do a couple different things, including the Basics of Buddhism class every Sunday, meditation on Thursdays, and Tuesdays we do a Dhamma talk. Now, I am a 34-year-old lay Buddhist disciple of the Theravada tradition. A lay Buddhist disciple means I'm not a monk or a master guru or anything like that. I'm just a regular lay disciple. And what we do here is somewhat follow the traditional Dhamma talk format in that I usually give a talk, up to the first half hour. Sometimes it goes longer, sometimes it goes less. And then the second half is usually put aside for question and answer, debate, discussion, etc. And when monastics give a talk, it's tradition for the people to listen to the talk and then to hold off their questions and comments till after. However, since I'm not a monastic and I like to have a little bit more of a discussion, feel free to always make a comment or a question while I'm talking. You're not interrupting or being rude or anything like that. Some of the best times are when we can engage in discussion and people can participate and add to that instead of having me yap on for 40 minutes. So, I was going to discuss. I had a set topic, but when there's usually only a couple people, I like to do basically like a question and answer kind of thing. Like, is there any specific topic in Buddhism um, that you'd like me to discuss or you'd like to discuss with everybody here? Anybody have any questions? Evil? Evil always has questions, that's why I ask. It's good to always have questions. If not, we can talk about my topic. It's not a big deal either way. But sometimes when there's a more intimate group, when there's just a few of us, it turns into a good discussion. And it's a time for people to ask questions where they normally don't feel like they can. Welcome, buddy. Oh, well, you just asked what my topic was going to be about. So I guess we're destined to talk about this. It's been an interesting week. There's the typical things that humans do in terms of reactions to such a thing. We've seen. What's interested me the most, however, is discussing this on a Buddhist forum. This has been an interesting discussion on this. If you've never been to the website newbuddhist.com. I highly suggest it, especially if you're a new Buddhist. I found that forum just about a week or two ago, and it's a very good community, very diverse Buddhist community. But that being said, we'll talk about the shooting. Now, there's a few things that I want to talk about. We're going to talk about death. We're going to talk about emotions. Now, every time something like this comes up, it's pretty predictable how people will react, because this is how our mind reacts to such a thing. So, what we have here on, I think it was Friday, right? Friday was the shooting, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, okay. So, what we have here is an act that led to the death of 30 some odd people. Now, in our society, we've almost become used to the death, these school shootings, right? But what we have in this is the death of children, right? And so there's different levels of how we react to these things. So there's a shooting, people die. We have a certain reaction. This is horrible, this is sad. But the more and more we get used to it, the more this just happens. So then there's that level. So we hear about another shooting, and it's like, oh, well, there's another shooting. And then we hear about it in a school, and it's like, oh, it's another school shooting. And then instead of teenagers, it's 5 and 10 years old, and then that's an even a higher level of emotional attachment with that, because these are kids. The funny thing about it is, why do you think that we have more of a reaction when it comes to children dying than an adult? Fizz. Yes. See, when it comes to children, we have this feeling that death shouldn't happen to children, that they weren't able to live a full life. And where does that stem from, right? That stems from our fear of death. That stems from our aversion of death. Yes, it does, Ursula. But don't say that to people who have an emotional attachment to what happened, because they will not like it. Trust me. If it's not in front of them, it does not affect them, because there's not an attachment to there. There's an attachment to my country, my people, the children in my country. Now, of course, we all feel sad that people die all over the world, but what we come to find out through our practice, right, and through our practice of Buddhism, is that, like you just said, there are people dying all the time, every day, in many, many different ways. And what we have to come to realize is that no matter how old we are, no matter what our situation in life, death can come at any time. There's a story, and this story fills me. Those of you who know me, you know that my wife died 7 years ago to cancer. She is 25, and in my experience with being a caregiver to somebody with cancer, being for 3 years almost as a second home, being Sloan Kettering, which is pretty much the biggest and most well-known cancer hospital in probably the world, let alone the country. And there's a whole floor. It's all children. We've been there. We were there many times, and I could see a sea of little children, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, all with bald heads. And that's something that most people probably would never want to see, right? You see these, oh my God, these children. What have they gone through? What have they suffered? And because we feel like it's not just if a kid should die, that is we have this feeling of it's not right. And we have our emotions that come through that. And then search for a way to understand it. And while we search for a way to understand it, we feel like something can be done, or something could have been done to stop this. The truth is that oftentimes there is nothing that can be done to stop something. There's nothing that can be done. Even though we might think banning all guns, or forcing people with mental illness to have to go to therapy or something like this, we might come up with all of these little methods that we think will stop it, but it won't. That is the unfortunate truth, and that's something that we don't want to accept, that death happens to all of us, and that sometimes death is not what we want it to be, or what we want to expect it to be. There's a story, and when I heard this story, I liked it because I think it made sense. And I'm trying to remember. I think it might have been maybe through Ajahn Brahm I heard it the first time, or I might have read it somewhere, and I don't remember. But it's the story of leaves falling off a tree in a storm. If there's a storm, for instance, there was just a hurricane in my parts in New Jersey, right? If there's a storm and there's leaves on the tree, if you look at the tree after the storm, what do you see? If you look on the ground, you see a lot of leaves on the ground. You see some leaves on the tree. But what do you see on the ground? You see nice green leaves on the ground, and you see old orange or yellow leaves on the ground. On the tree, you would think that, there would only be very good, very green new leaves on the tree. But if you look on the tree, there's not just green leaves, but there's these old raggly leaves that are still. There must have been. There could probably have two hurricanes and an earthquake at the same time, and those old leaves are going to stay on that tree, right? So what's this analogy of? This is the analogy of life and death. No matter the old leaves, or the leaves that should be off the tree are older people, right? Because we think that the older people are the first ones that should fall, but that's not always the case. Those nice, young, green leaves also fall off the tree. And we have the story of the famous story. I believe it's the sutta, the mustard seed sutta, where this woman who had a son, and the son was I think less than a year old, and he died, and she was stricken with grief, and she's going around holding her son's body, and she wouldn't let it go. And she heard about the Buddha and the possibility that the Buddha could bring her son back to life. And she brought her son to the Buddha and said, "Buddha, sir, can you bring my son back to life?" And the Buddha said, "Yes, I can." The Buddha said, "Find me a mustard seed from a home in this town where nobody has died." So she said, "Oh, thank you very much." So she went out in search of a mustard seed from a home where nobody's died. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist for us to realize that she never found that home. And she went back to the Buddha, and dejected, and says, there is no home where nobody has died." And the Buddha gave her a Dhamma talk. This is impermanence. Such is the way it is. So, and these are all nice words. Somebody who has lost somebody, these words might not help. Because there is this grief and this anguish that comes with loss, especially loss. The stronger your attachment in life, the harder the loss will be. And there's no harder of a loss than losing a spouse, a child, a mother, a father. The Buddha says that greater than the water in the four oceans are the tears that we've cried throughout endless existence. The tears that we've cried for our mother, for our father, for our child, etc. So we know that as Buddhists, as we're trying to practice, we know that we want to practice and understand death and always be mindful of it. Know that it can come at any time. Even for those who we think it should never come for. And we think that people should be able to live their lives. When my wife died, you go through a lot of different things in the grieving process, but one of the things that always hurt me the most was the thought of, my wife will never be alive to see this or to see that. And that's a stinging feeling. And then you think about something that's going to happen in the future. Oh, she won't be there. And you think about it, and that's that loss. That's that feeling of despair, because you had these plans with this person, and this person's no longer there. And you feel the injustice of, well, they should have been able to live a life. And we're talking about, my wife was 25 at the time, so we're talking about an adult. When it comes to a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, of course it's even a greater feeling, a greater emotion of that they should be able to live their life. But this is not life. This is not reality. And what we do in our lives is try to hide reality, don't we? We try to hide away dead bodies. We try to hide that we are getting old, right? We try to put all kinds of cosmetics, and we try to have hair coloring and try to do all this stuff. We don't like to face these realities in life. And we're not really, a lot of us are not equipped for that either, because we were never brought up that way. So we come to Buddhism and it's like something brand new. It's like, wow, I never thought about death before. And if you never had the chance to think about death, then of course, why would you? I mean, I don't know. I'm sure. I don't know. Most people, by the time they're my age, 34, they've probably experienced some death in the family. My earliest remembrance of death was when my grandfather died when I was 10 years old. I remember that vividly. And of course, there were many, many deaths between my grandfather's death and my wife's death. So I got to come to understand death and to not really fear it. It was something that to this day it doesn't bother me like it does many others. And of course, since I became got into the practice, meditating on death as often as you can is very important. So when we have an experience like this shooting, one of the most important things to do is to be as observant and mindful as possible, right? Observe and be mindful of your emotions. This kind of situation is a wonderful, and of course that's a bad word for saying for the situation, but it's an amazing and situation to be able to practice, to understand your emotions and to understand your mind. So when you can be mindful and observant of what your mind and the emotions that come up, the emotions of sadness, the emotions of aversion. We have an aversion. No kid should die. That's ridiculous. And because of that aversion, what do we want to do? We want to do something. We need to make a law, or we need to do this, or we need to do that. And oftentimes that knee-jerk reaction to do something to make us feel better causes more suffering in the end. A good example is something like the Megan's Law, right? Of course, Megan can't get it. She's from my state. I remember I was 16, 17 when this happened, when she was, abducted and raped and murdered. I think she was 7 years old. And that led to such a reaction that it recreated this Megan's Law offender list, which is a good thing. But somebody like me who's in Child Protective Services sees this on a regular basis, that you can pee out in public and become a sex offender. So these things can turn into like, whoa, like all these unintended consequences of what we rush to do because we have this feeling that something needs to be done. This is why in a situation like this is the most important situation to be mindful. Being mindful and a regular everyday period, that's almost easy in a way. Being mindful in a situation where you are overcome with strong emotions, strong feelings, is very, very hard. And that's why we need to practice this. Yes, unfortunately we make these, there's a saying, and it's very unpopular for most people because they don't understand it. But the saying is, dead kids make bad laws. And if you notice, the laws these days are named after a child, right? Because a grieving parent, and you can't deny the emotions of a grieving parent. I'm not a parent, and I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child. So you can't judge somebody for feeling like they something. My child died because of this reason, and I don't want another child to die because of that, and I want to feel like my child's death has a meaning, so we're going to do this. And that can be a good thing, but it can also be a very bad thing as well. So that's why being mindful, keeping your wits about you, is very important in a situation like this. Not only on a cultural level because of a big event that happened, but also in your daily lives. When something is going wrong, you want to be as mindful as possible, because we know when you are mindful, that is when you know what's the best thing to do right now. And of course, this is not something that we can force. You can't just be in a situation, an emergency situation, and force yourself to be mindful. It's not something that you can do with willpower. It's something that comes naturally with practice. So, like when I was in the new Buddhist forum and we were debating, and people, it started out as, oh, this is horrible, and then it turned into, well, what has to be done, and then it turned into gun versus anti-gun, and then it went past that. And this is Buddhist. This is not just regular people. These are Buddhists that turn in that. But you know what it is? Humans are humans. This is what we do. We have a mind of greed, hatred, and delusion. And this is how we react, no matter what we call ourselves. And so it went from the gun to anti-gun, and then it turned into the people behind those stances. Like, oh, those evil Republicans, or those bad hippies, or those. Then it turned into rednecks, those rednecks with their guns, and then this, and it turned into such a negativity, such negativity that I had to stop being part of the conversation, because it's unfortunate that we take a situation, a really bad situation, and we turn it into division amongst us, right? Where we're supposed to be in a situation like this, we should be together as one. But this feeling, this strong feeling that we have to do something, and of course, not everybody agrees on what we need to do. So, we come to heads. And then it turns even more negative, because then our biases come out. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I believe this way. I believe that way. The other people are bad. The other people don't know what the heck they're talking about. And so it just gets even more divided, more divided, more divided. And we should, as those of us who are following the path of Dhamma, who are trying to get rid of our views, trying to get rid of, and I don't mean get rid of forcefully, but we're trying to see things as they truly are, and to not let these, and naturally not let these things bother us as much. And I have to admit, it was this debating was very good for me, because it forced me to observe myself and to see my biases and to see my views, where I don't think about these views. I feel like I've abandoned them for the most part. But then a situation comes, and then debate comes, and then your views come back. So there's not one situation that happens in life that is not better served with mindfulness. And the way we get mindfulness, of course, is to practice. Practice our mindfulness, practice our meditation. Observe when an emotion comes up, we observe the emotion. Objectively, without judgment. Of course, it's our nature to judge. So when we judge, we want to observe that. And sometimes, if we're trying to be good Buddhists in parentheses, and we see ourselves judging, and we get negative because, oh damn it, I'm supposed to be a good Buddhist, I shouldn't be judging. And so then you get negative feelings. So you observe that. The more you observe, the more you start to see things as they truly are, and the more calm you become. So when you are in that calmness, you know better what to do. It's as simple as that. So I don't know. I didn't really know like what exactly this talk was going to lead or what I was going to do with this talk. Um, there's a few things I wanted to say, and I think I got pretty much all of them in. Um, but this is something that is everybody can agree it's something that nobody wants to see happen. Where everybody disagrees is what to do about the problem. And the thing that we know is that we can't stop everything bad from happening in this world. It can't be done. We can do everything that we think that we can do, and it'll still happen. It might not happen to the degree that it happened. I mean, a good case in point is on the same day that this shooting happened in America, a guy goes in China goes to a school with a knife and starts knifing kids. Now, I don't think anybody died, but there's a picture. You see this picture of this guy holding this 3-year-old, and there's a knife in this 3-year-old. And like, so wow, like some people will say, who want to ban all guns. People will say, oh well, see, 20, 30 people didn't die in that situation. Well, I don't know. Having a knifing a 3-year-old is pretty bad too. I mean, I guess if you really wanted to, say settle for that, okay. But what are you gonna do? No matter what you do, bad stuff will still happen. People will still die, and we have to learn to accept that. We don't want to accept that. We want to fight against it. And I was, those people who know me for a while, I was big into politics. I was big into justice and big into, I think that something needs to happen. We need to fix things. And over the years, it just came to the point to feeling that nothing, you can't change the world. That was what I thought. And then I heard that statement that the Buddha didn't change the world, he made peace with the conditions in it. And that helped to change, that was like the last spark that helped to change my worldview. And since then, well, I do get like a situation like that, I do get occasionally, the old me, the old me, right? Because we are changing. There's no such thing as a me that is forever, right? The same me 10 years ago is not the same me now. So the old me comes back every once in a while. Sort of like if you ever seen Lord of the Rings at Golem, it's like you have like the nice guy, and then the golem comes back. So every once in a while, the old me does want to come back and get in some debating and some arguing, and then that lasts about a minute, and I say, okay, good. So there's no easy answers. There's no fix-all. Just we feel like we live in a very violent time. But if you know history, we're in like the safest time in existence. Back in the day, men, women, and children were getting slaughtered left and right. I mean, that was common practice. And obviously we feel like we're supposed to be in more civilized times, but even today When our government, um, under Obama was the president at the time, we drone bombed a an American citizen, Alar Alakwi, I think, and he's a noted terrorist, I guess. But he was an American citizen, and we're big on trials, right? But we drone bombed his car, and his 13-year-old son was in the car, and the son died. And this goes back to what Ursula is saying. Yeah, we, and people on Facebook that will post, oh, Obama, cries over these kids, but also has drone bombed 150 kids, yada yada yada, which is true. And this is not against Obama. This is any president. Those of you who know my past, I'm a libertarian, so I don't like Republicans or Democrats. So we have these double standards, and where that comes from is attachment, right? We're attached to our kids. We're not attached to the other kids, and we don't see them on the news. So, there's no attachment. Suffering comes from attachment. If there's no attachment, there's no suffering. The Buddha said that. The less attachment you have to family, to friends, to anything, the less you hold dear, the less you'll attach. It's as simple as that. So these, children that are dying all across the world, we see the occasional commercial from like the Catholic Children's Fund or whatever, that guy with the beard, and he's like, this is XYZ, and she, for 10 cents a day, she can, eat and this and that. And so we see that every once in a while. But we are blind to a lot of the suffering that happens in the world because we want to be blind. For many people, the thinking about all the suffering that happens in the world is depressing. And that's kind of like where the people feel like Buddhism is depressing, right? Like, oh, all the Buddha talks about is suffering this, suffering that. But they don't know the full truth, right? They don't know what we're trying to move towards is the extinction of dukkha, of suffering. But people have this, wrong view of the world, and they want to suffering suck. I might have to use that in the future. I've never. That's pretty cool. Suffering succotash. I like it. I can't believe all the years I've never heard that put together. That's great. So I guess my message to this is my main message is from Looney Tunes. Yeah, my main message is to always practice mindfulness of death, to work on your mindfulness, and to observe when we have these strong feelings, and to what was that? What else was I going to say? I forgot. There was a third point. It'll come back to me. All things are impermanent, right? No matter what, all things are arising, peaking, and passing away. Even my own thought process, especially our own thought process. So any comments or questions at this point? Since I yapped on for about 40 some odd minutes, not quite knowing where I was going or what I wanted to really say. Nope. Any personal reflections on your thoughts about what happened? Feel free. Our point of view is rough with regular people. That's why when stuff like this happens, I only really talk to Buddhists about it. And even a lot of Buddhists, people have different views of things. Sometimes I feel, and it's kind of felt like the whole I've been called, like, earlier, before I was a Buddhist, I was called cold. I was called, um, oh, you're cold. It's a different view. If we can help it, yeah. But I think the issue is coming to realize that we can do only what we can do, and anything beyond that is beyond our ability to change. I think the most important thing is to try to observe where the desire to do something comes from. I'm gonna read from the book that we were just reading on Sunday, mindfulness. Bante G's Four Foundations of Mindfulness in Plain English, and I think he puts it succinctly. I'm going to read it. It says, I walk as much as I can every day. Often I see deer that have been shot by hunters. Sometimes the hunters cannot find them, and the carcasses rot by the roadside. I also see trash thrown by the road, beer cans, liquor bottles, TV antennas, refrigerators, tables, and other household junk. Throughout the spring and summer, this garbage also rots. Because I desire to see a clean environment, these sights sometimes disturb my mind. But then mindfulness intervenes. I remind myself that desire does me more harm than good. Even the wholesome wish for people to stop hunting or to dispose properly of their trash unsettles my mind and causes me to suffer. So instead of being attached to my environmental principles, I remind myself that I cannot fix the whole world and let go of my desire. I may not be able to remove the world's greed, but I can get rid of my own. The moment I do, I begin to relax. Then and there, I experience peace. I don't think I could probably say it any better. I pretty much totally agree with what Bante G says right there. And this is, I've come to, in terms of letting go of my attachments to principles and beliefs, you find peace. But that's hard. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody wants to do that. But from a monastic, this is what he says. And it's funny. I've walked that road too. When I go to Bhavana Society with Bante G and with Bante Silananda and just by myself, and I see all of the same things that he just described. But this is not something that you can change. So you have to make peace with it. Just like that quote says, the Buddha did not change the world, he made peace with the conditions in it. Now, I offer an opposite poem to that, because I think there's a middle path to that. There's a middle way. And does anybody know what the starfish poem is? Has anybody heard of the starfish poem? Starfish poem is that there was this old man, this wise old man, and he was walking down the beach, and there were many, many hundreds and thousands of starfish. And he walked out and he saw a kid, and there's a kid throwing starfish back into the water. And the wise old man said to the kid, "What are you doing that? You'll never be able to save all of these starfish." And as the kid was throwing a starfish into the water, or no, he says, "You'll never be able to save all these starfish. You'll never be able to make a difference." And as the kid's throwing the starfish into the water, he says, "I made a difference for that one." So, of course, you can do something to help others. You can try to make the world a little bit better, but you shouldn't be attached to that, and you should know that there's a limit to what you can do. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means to know that there's a limit, and to know that there's no such thing as a peaceful utopian world where no kids die and everybody lives to a ripe old age of 100. Those of you who know aging science, like Professor Audrey DeGray, he is working on, and he's talking about people who are alive now living to 150 or more and stopping aging. His hypothesis is that we don't have to age and that we can change it. It's a possibility. I don't know. I mean, I in the past, I always, like when I was a kid, I thought it would be awesome to live like 1,000, 2,000 years. And now I think to myself, nah, I'm pretty okay with death. I don't know if I really want to live 1,000 years. I'm good, thanks. Yep. So I feel like I have a good 100 years in me. I'm 34. The way I put it, the way I think of it is like I'm done with 1/3 of my life. I got 2/3 left. I'm good. I'm ready to go after that. Of course, we know that I could die tomorrow. So I know that I could have died 15 years ago, 20 years ago. That's the way it is. Actually, Ursula, ironically, I used to say as I was growing up, kill me by the time I'm 64. 64, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with it. Yeah, I'll be done with life. 64 years old, you can put a bullet in me. I used to say stuff like that. But now I don't know. Now I have a new lease on life. So I figure I wouldn't mind being living till about 100, being a monastic. I'll be one of those old guys, one of those old monks. Wow, that's amazing to have. I don't. I mean, I can only hope that my father will be alive when I'm that old. But it's. I think from my perspective of my grandfather dying so young, and all my grandparents dying before well, all except one dying before I turned 18, it's kind of like, I kind of expect it, you know. He's a Highlander. Ironically, when I thought about living 1,000 years, that's what I thought about, being a Highlander. But then, the Highlander, and like every show that I ever saw where somebody lived forever or lived thousands of years, everybody they ever loved always died, and they kept living. In a lot of ways, it's like being in samsara. Really, I mean, think about it. It's like being reborn. Rebirth is being in samsara. Every time you're reborn, everybody you know and love is going to die. Over and 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 over again. So it's no wonder why the Buddha's like, screw this, I'm getting out of this thing. You guys, I have compassion for you all, but I'm getting out of this. And then he came back and says, okay, well, this is how you get out. The first 30 years didn't go by that fast. But time is definitely speeding up for me. There's no doubt. I can't believe the last 10 years. It went by so quick. Now, I mean, when I think about the last 10 years, married for 4 years, then last 6, 7 years a job, and this and that. I mean, when you think about every year, it seems like, oh yeah, that was a long time, a decade. But when you think about like 2001. Like, holy crap, like I remember like sitting and watching the fireworks for the year 2000 as it went across the world. Like, it feels like it was yesterday. In 2000 I was, well, I was 22. Now I'm 34. Whoa, God, I'm old. Yeah. I was always what they call an old soul. When I was young, I always wanted to be older. And my mom would always say, you're going to regret that. And when I was young, I always felt more comfortable in um, the presence of adults. Like, I always felt like I could talk to adults more than I could talk to kids. Yeah. Well, I'm still I still consider myself a big kid. I don't know any other 34-year-old that goes and does parkour with 18-year-olds and runs around, at parks with their 8-year-old nephew, while other parents look at me like I'm nuts. So no, don't have no fear. Even though I say I'm old, I still feel like a big kid. But yeah, I'm old. So I guess it's just about 10 o'clock or 5 o'clock SLT. So unless there's any, I guess, final comments, questions, I think we can end there. You know what? I wanted to. Oh, 7 o'clock SLT, yeah. I also just wanted to say real quick, remember metta. Metta is important for all beings. And we don't, you can give metta to those who died and stuff like that. But it's really more important to develop it for all beings, because we know that all beings are stuck in this suffering. All beings are stuck, and in our countless lifetimes, if there is such a thing, we died at all kinds of ages. We had all kinds of suffering. This is about my training for what? All the crazy physical things that I do, being an old man. Evil, good to see you as always. In terms of what I've done or my normal schedule of what I do, like meditation wise, or who I learned from. Well, I guess you could say I don't have a teacher in daily life. Um, who I consider my first teachers are Bhikkhu Bodhi, Ajahn Brahm, and by extension Ajahn Chah, and then Venerable Yuta Dhamma, who I met here. He was a teacher here. Now he has his own channel and stuff like that. And I guess the closest thing to a real life teacher I have is Bhante Ji and Bhante Silananda at the Bhavana Society. I've been going there for just about over a year now. I've been there 6 times. It's a 5-hour drive for me, so obviously I don't go often. I try to make it every other week. But I took the 8 lifetime precepts with them. They know me all by Jayantha. I've been there enough in the last year and I've spoken to them enough about wanting to ordain and stuff like that. That I guess technically, I've been to 3 or 4 retreats there in the last year. So I guess technically they're my teachers. They're the closest thing to a real life teacher I have. But I don't have a daily life teacher. I don't have somebody who is a daily meditation teacher, that kind of thing. In a lot of ways, I'm kind of happy that I didn't and that I don't, because I can observe things and see things and feel where my own practice goes. But in other ways, I do wish that I did have somebody that I could, could learn from daily. That's why something like the Buddhist Center is so important. And so for those of us, I remember one time a woman who was coming here regularly. She's from the middle of Montana. I don't think there was a Buddhist monk within 300 miles of her. So the Buddhist Center was her sangha, was her teacher. Is there anything else, Lama? And even with Bhante G and Bhante Silananda, there's some things that I feel are beneficial, and there's some things that like for instance, how they do walking meditation. They teach walking meditation very, very slow, and I've always never, and that never has worked for me. I just do it at my normal walking pace. So even with a teacher, I don't think I would follow everything that they would want me to do to the letter. And it's also important to have many teachers. Many, many teachers. Anything else? Okay, so I guess we can end there. It's a little bit after 7. Until next time, much metta to you all. And Sukhi Hantu, may you be happy. Good to see you all.